The final chapter is so well received. First Peacock show to wind up in the top 10 in the Nielsen's, correct?
Yeah, in fact, top 5 in the
top
first
5
in the first 2 weeks. Yeah, in the first 2 weeks. Yeah.
It was trending for days, and
Yeah.
I got the opportunity to go to the premiere. That was the last time we saw each other. So, I saw the episodes before that the public had seen them, and I knew it was going to be a great response. Did you know it was going to be this well received?
Well, I certainly felt like they were a fitting tribute to the legacy of the 2 movies. I felt like people would binge. I didn't know they would watch it multiple times. I was hearing reports that people were watching it like 2, 3, 4, up to 6 or 8 times. And I'm like, you have time to watch 8 hours of content 8 times? That is 2 full days, no stopping. So, I felt like, it would resonate. I was hoping it would, because I wasn't sure, like you get so close to something, certain things that with the television show had not happened with the movies, where I had written everything in the movies, I had directed of both movies. So now to have other writers, to have other directors, and to be producing, and yes, in editorial and all that kind of stuff, you think, okay, it's there, but you just never know.
And I would imagine the reception, obviously, I'm sure Peacock very happy with the reception. Did Peacock come to you, or have they come to you and said, you sure you don't want to run this back? We sure you don't want to extend this even more?
Well, I mean, I was very clear that this was the final chapters. So they jokingly, I mean, cracking but facking, as my wife would say, like, hey, you sure? Let's run it. Is there a coda we can put on this? And I'm like, nah. I mean, I think if I said, let's run it back, they would try to find a way, but that would be difficult. It would be difficult to do.
I mean, Malcolm, you could always say the final chapter, psych. I mean, we can keep going.
I could, but I will not.
But you will not. Okay.
No. Listen, I think The Best Man had its time. I have other stories to tell. I think these actors have other roles to fill. I think to get them all back together again would be very, very difficult. It was difficult this time around, and it's like leave the people wanting more rather than jumping the shark. You don't want to be them that show that's like, why they do that? Like, I don't want to be the why they do that show. You know what I mean? And we know our people. They would be, why they do that?
No, you're right. I mean, listen, a producer told me a long time ago is you'd rather people leave the party too early, having had a great time, than that moment where the party lights come up and everybody looking around and they're like, oh, we stayed too long. And then, you want them to have that feeling.
Absolutely. And thankfully, people really, it resonated with people in a really big way. We've heard, I would say 95% positive reviews. And I think it's actually fitting, because people were saying, I didn't know I needed this. I didn't know I needed this series. I think people back in 1999 didn't know they needed The Best Man. And so, that was, it's fitting that people feel that way, that like, I think they feel that way because they've grown up with these characters. It's so relatable to people who were in their 20s when this thing started and now are entering things and dealing with stuff that we're all dealing with at this age, with parenting and having to parent your parents, and career choices and love and divorce and marriage and friendship. It's all these things that we're like, oh, like, wow, like this is me. This is and that's always been the intention with Best Man, is to like be a reflection of Black America that wasn't seen that much in the 90s or prior for that matter.
Now, you said a second ago that, it took a little bit of doing to get this in the ensemble cast back together, to convince them.
Is that how I characterized it? A little bit of doing?
Okay. Maybe a lot of doing, maybe a lot. Who was the most resistant to do this again?
I think, first of all, they all came back together, right? They all, like, as a group, negotiated together. They were united front in terms of what they wanted, what they thought, the show should be, and whatnot. So there wasn't like an outlier that was like, I don't know if I want to do this. They all wanted to revisit these characters. They all wanted to, like, continue the story. So there wasn't any like standout that was like, well, it was, if you can get them, then I mean, there were a couple of things like, but because, as a group, their intentions go in together, but like, oh, well, I've got this thing that I'm doing. I got this thing that I'm doing, and that, you have to write around me and blah, 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 blah. So, there were challenges along the way, but there was nobody that was like, I ain't doing this, right? I got to be convinced to do it. And by the way, I told them all from the get-go, I'm like, this is a want to do project. This is not a have to do project. We can leave well enough alone. We had a good run with the first two movies. We don't need to do anything else. But we should, if we're going to do it, we should approach it with joy and love, and want to say, hey, we want to do this one last time.
Yeah, I asked that because I know Terrence Howard has said he's retiring from acting, or retired. So I wondered if it may have taken a little bit of convincing with him, just given
No, in
where
fact,
he is.
because he had retired after Empire, and then when he knew I wanted to do this, because this was the third movie of Best Man, predated Empire, or we were trying to have it, but it didn't work out. And I remember I was there when he got his star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, and he was like, I'm doing this. I'm definitely doing this for you, and I'm like, all right, cool. So it wasn't like Terrence was not, I think Terrence, like anyone, likes money, needs money, and said, hey, and he loves this character, and this character was made for Terrence Howard. You know what I mean? Like, I didn't write it for him, but once he read the words, it was like, he's that dude.
Well, since we're talking about Terrence, I have to know, and by now, if you have not seen The Best Man, the final chapters, I don't even feel the need to say spoiler alert. You just got to deal with it. If you haven't watched it, that's a you problem. That is not my problem. So we're going to talk about some things that are in there. But one of the funniest scenes in the entire series was when he said, keep my wife's name out your mouth. That whole argue. I got to imagine that was an ad lib, right? Like that was an ad lib?
No.
That was not an ad lib.
I wrote that.
Look at you, Malcolm.
A
genius.
I couldn't deliver that line, but he and it was funny every time I heard him say it. It was so funny, and he was the perfect guy to say it. I don't know if Will Smith and Chris Rock will work with me after that line, but they should, at least Chris should recognize that what a joke is, and he is a comedic genius. I won't understand why it's funny. I think Will would too. I mean, it was. By the way, the reference, terrible moment in history, in our culture, and I hated it. I felt so bad seeing it, but it was a good joke.
Yeah, it was a joke that absolutely landed. So it was good. But I know when you got into it, and you've done like so many other projects, but just sticking with The Best Man for a moment, when you got into it, you probably didn't see this as a franchise, right? It was supposed to be
not at
one
all.
And done. Yeah, not at all, right? And
yeah, I mean, it was my first movie, and what I did intend to do was make a classic. I wanted to have something that would stand the test of time. And so that was the goal in making The Best Man. So when sequel talk happened, like right afterwards, I was like, no, I don't want to be a one-trick pony. I don't want people to say, oh, that's all he can do. I didn't have another story to tell, after, the first Best Man. I was like, I need to live some life. These characters need to live some life. Maybe I'll revisit them in 10 years. That was my thought process, because it's like, often sequels are just money grabs, right? Like that, and if you don't have anything kind of to back it up, yeah, you're bringing these people back together, but the story, like, you set a high bar with, a story, and it resonates, and it hits people, and people are like, and they feel a kinship to it. It's hard to top that or to bring that back.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting that you say that because the way The Best Man ended, it was almost like you did have a sequel in mind because anybody who watched the first one was like, oh, clearly Shelby is going to get married to Terrence Howard, is going to get married to Quentin. That was what you left us with. So
You mean with the first Best Man or the second one?
the first one. The first one,
Well, the
that
first one,
was
they
the
just
thought.
slept together. I mean, we do all kinds of things in our 20s.
You left the cliffhanger was like, oh, that makes a lot of sense. Their
It was a
opposites
joke.
attract. They hate each other.
Yeah, the thing was, Jemele, with that, it was a button. It was a button to the movie, and strictly for laughs. You know what I mean? That's all it was supposed to be. And honestly, that was never an impetus for like, okay, like how are we gonna like tell the story? It was just kind of like, yeah, it's a nice little thing. Honestly, we could have left well enough alone with the first Best Man, but we ran it back.